Video, we'll discuss 10 missing tiaras that are missing either because they've been auctioned off or disposed of. The small diamond and pearl tiara that was once worn by Princess Christina of Sweden had a major royal pedigree. The tiara once belonged to Christina's great-great-grandmother, Queen Sophia of Sweden. The tiara, which was made by Ribhagen, was once owned by Queen Sophia of Sweden and Norway, the wife of King Oscar II. The little tiara is set with tiny diamonds and pearls. Oscar and Sophia had 4 sons, one of whom became King Gustav V. But another of their sons had a star-crossed romance. Prince Oscar, the second eldest, fell in love with Ebba Munch, one of the ladies-in-waiting at the Swedish court. She lost her job, and the family made Oscar wait 2 years before he could marry her, hoping the romance would cool off. It didn't. He lost his title, but he was given permission to marry Ebba. The marriage was a success, and the couple had 5 children. Oscar and Ebba also received this tiara. It's likely Oscar inherited it from his mother when she died in 1913. Queen Sophia had been supportive of the marriage between Oscar and Ebba. She attended their wedding, but the king did not. Eventually, the tiara passed to Oscar and Ebba's third daughter, Elsa. She married a commoner, Hugo Cedergren, but retained close ties to her royal cousins. She was a godmother of Princess Christina, and she gave Queen Sophia's tiara to Princess Christina. Christina wore the tiara tilted slightly backwards, almost like a jeweled headband. The tiara continued to be a staple in Christina's jewelry collection until 2012. That year, a family friend of the Magnussons stole the tiara and other pieces of jewelry from the safe in their apartment. According to police reports, the thief sold several valuable family pieces to drug dealers, which has been on the rise in Sweden since their open borders policy, but he threw the tiara off a Stockholm bridge. Divers searched for the tiara, but could not find it. A tiny, sparkly piece of Bernadotte history has sadly disappeared, perhaps permanently swallowed up in the sea. The next lost tiara is Maria Alexandrovna's diamond fringe tiara. This was a Romanov wedding gift that went from Russia to the United Kingdom, Germany, Spain, Romania, and Yugoslavia before being eventually sold. Made for Tsar Alexander II of Russia in 1874 as a wedding gift for his only daughter, Grand Duchess Maria Alexandrovna, when she was married to Prince Alfred, Duke of Edinburgh, the second son of Queen Victoria. Composed of diamond bars divided by diamond spikes, the tiara is fashioned on the traditional Russian court diadem, the kokoshnik. Upon her arrival to the UK, Grand Duchess Maria Alexandrovna flaunted her ancestry and magnificent jewels mined from the mines of Russia, much to the dislike of Queen Victoria and her sister-in-laws who were more low-key. After a period in Malta, the Duke and Duchess of Edinburgh were the Duke and Duchess of Saxe-Coburg-Gotha, which was a German sovereign state, in 1887. As Duchess of Saxe-Coburg-Gotha, Maria wore her fringe tiara for official portraits, as well as at the coronation of her nephew, Tsar Nicholas II of Russia, the last Tsar, in 1896, along with her stunning Bolin ruby necklace at the coronation of another nephew, King George V, in 1911. Upon her death in 1920, the fringe tiara was left to the youngest of her 4 daughters, Princess Beatrice, Duchess of Galliera. Princess Beatrice, known as Baby B, married infant Alfonso, Duke of Galleria, a first cousin of then King Alfonso of Spain, in 1909. The Duchess of Galleria wore her mother's fringe tiara at the grand coronation of her sister, Queen Marie of Romania, in 1922, and at an outpatient clinic during the Spanish Civil War. She decided to sell the tiara, and the buyer was none other than her sister, Queen Marie of Romania, who was a widow by that point. Queen Marie wore the fringe tiara in 2 portraits by artist Philip de Laszlo and at an official banquet in 1936. After Queen Marie's death in 1938, the tiara was inherited by her second daughter, Queen Marie of Yugoslavia. By 1938, Queen Marie of Yugoslavia had been a widow for 4 years and was living a relatively normal life in the United Kingdom. She had little occasion to wear the fringe tiara, and coupled with World War II and the subsequent exile of the Yugoslavian royal family, meant that Queen Marie wasn't photographed wearing the fringe tiara until she decided to auction the piece along with an eagle corsage ornament in 1960. The fringe tiara was sold for £10,800 in 1960 at Sotheby's in London to the Jewish art dealer Levi Cohen, and it hasn't been publicly seen since. Its current whereabouts are unknown. The Bavarian Sunburst tiara is a lost diamond tiara which entered the Bavarian collection in 1883 when Infanta Maria de la Paz of Spain married Prince Ludwig Ferdinand of Bavaria. He was a first cousin of the nation's last king, Ludwig III. The tiara was one of Maria's wedding gifts from her mother, Queen Isabella II of Spain. The large fleur-de-lis element in the center of the tiara served as a reminder of Maria's Bourbon heritage. It is a symbol of that royal house. The central element, including the fleur-de-lis, is unusual in that it is set en tremblant, which means that it moves slightly as the wearer moves. The women of the family continued to wear this tiara to major royal events in years before they decided to put it up for sale. Ursula of Bavaria, who is married to Maria's great-grandson Leopold, wore it to Albert and Charlene of Monaco's wedding reception in 2011. Her daughter-in-law, Anna, wore the tiara to a big royal wedding in Sweden in 2010. The tiara even graced the head of a Bavarian bride, Philippa, in 2012. But for reasons unknown, the family decided to put the tiara, as well as some other jewels, up for auction in May 2013 at Sotheby's. Auction estimates noted that the tiara was expected to fetch between $100 and $150,000, but when the hammer fell, a lucky buyer had paid more than $180,000 on this piece. One of the most important sparklers in Norway, Queen Maud's pearl tiara, graced the heads of 2 generations of Norwegian royal ladies. It would have probably crowned a few more too if only it hadn't been involved in a notorious jewelry theft. The original pearl and diamond tiara that belonged to the very fashionable Queen Maud was given to her by her parents, King Edward VII and Queen Alexandra of the United Kingdom, when she married Prince Karl of Denmark in 1896. She then embarked on a career of fashion, and many of her gowns are available for public view today. It is often reported that the tiara was commissioned from Gerard, then the official royal jeweler in Britain. The piece was a lovely wedding gift for a princess joining another royal family, but it was never intended to become a central part of another royal family's jewel collection. Maud unexpectedly became queen of newly independent Norway in 1905, when her husband was chosen as the country's new monarch. She wore the tiara, which has a large detachable central element, until her death in 1938. Maud's son, King Olav V, inherited the tiara from his mother, but it was a long time before he was reunited with the tiara. Maud had taken her jewelry with her to Britain for a visit in the autumn of 1938, and she unexpectedly died while she was there. The late Queen's jewels were kept safe in Windsor Castle for another 15 years and had to stay there during World War II. The Norwegians were finally able to reclaim the tiara in 1953 when they visited Britain for the coronation of Olive's cousin, Queen Elizabeth II. Olive's son, King Harold V, is the current owner of the tiara. He received it when Maud's jewels were divided following his wedding to Sonia Haraldson in 1968. Sonia wore both the small and large versions of Maud's tiara. But then in 1995, tiara tragedy struck. The piece was sent to Gerard in London to be cleaned, and while there it was stolen. The theft revealed the approximate value of the tiara at the time, $312,000. It has never been recovered. Gerard made a perfect replica of the original pearl and diamond tiara for the family, and that's the tiara that has been worn in the family since, both in full and smaller settings. A small version of the new tiara was lent to Harold and Sonia's daughter, Princess Martha Louise, for her wedding to Ari Ben in 2002. It was also worn by Crown Princess Mette Merritt at the wedding of Crown Princess Victoria of Sweden in 2010. What do you think? In the grand scheme of things, is an exact precious replica of an antique royal tiara almost as good as the real thing? Featuring a large detachable diamond cluster within an ornate scroll design, the harewood scroll tiara is said to have a Russian provenance, possibly bought from an exiled Romanov relative around the time of Princess Mary's wedding to Viscount Lascelles, the later 6th Earl of Harewood in 1922. The tiara was frequently used with a sapphire and diamond cluster brooch, which was a wedding gift from Queen Mary, and often paired with a necklace from Queen Victoria's sapphire parure and a devant de corsage formerly in the collection of the Grand Duchess Olga Feodorovna, which was a wedding gift from her groom. The Princess Royal also frequently wore the all-diamond version of the Harewood scroll tiara with diamond rivieres or her grand emerald necklace, most notably at a coronation gala at Covent Garden in 1953. Following Princess Mary's death in 1965, the Harewood scroll tiara in its diamond version was auctioned in 1970 for £9,500, while the sapphire and diamond brooch were sold for £10,500. The devant de corsage had been sold for $28,000 in 1960 during her lifetime, while the Queen Victoria's sapphire necklace sold for $8,000. More recently, after remaining in the family for decades, Queen Victoria's sapphire coronet was sold, but unlike other pieces which disappeared, it went on display in the Victoria Albert Museum in 2019. The Cartier Nizam of Hyderabad tiara, as well as a necklace, were gifted to Princess Elizabeth of the United Kingdom by the Nizam of Hyderabad, an Indian prince, and they hold further special meaning since the Queen chose them herself after being told she could select whatever she wanted at the luxurious jewelry house. The Duchess of Cambridge has had the pleasure of wearing a piece from the set too, having worn a sparkling diamond necklace with her Jenny Packham gown for the National Portrait Gallery's Portrait Gala in 2014. As for the original tiara, the Queen had it completely dismantled in the 1970s in order to make what is now known as the Burmese ruby tiara, adding rubies that were also given to the monarch as a wedding gift, this time from the people of Burma. It's said that the Queen had this tiara made because the Queen Mother was very attached to another headpiece featuring rubies in the royal collection, the Oriental Circlet tiara, which should have been passed on to Elizabeth when she became queen. But rather than take it from her mother, the Queen decided to have another made, hence the Burmese ruby tiara, which we see her wearing regularly in photos. She chose to wear it to host then-President Donald Trump for a state dinner at Buckingham Palace in January 2020. There aren't many tiaras around that feature garnets, which are a native North American stone, wonderfully rich and varied semi-precious gemstones, and there are even fewer that are lovely balanced garnet, pearl, and diamond kokoshniks. This Rosenberg kokoshnik tiara was commissioned in the 1930s by Prince Viggo, the son of Prince Valdemar of Denmark, for his American-born wife Eleanor. Viggo was the Count of Rosenborg, and Eleanor didn't have any children, so the tiara ended up with their nephew, Count Fleming of Rosenborg. His wife wore it at several major royal events in Denmark and Norway. He renounced his rights to the throne and his princely title and style in 1949, and took the title of Count of Rosenborg. He served in the Royal Danish Navy as a commander. Count Fleming of Rosenborg had 4 children and 10 grandchildren. The family sold the piece in May 2014 at Sotheby's for more than $275,000, and its location is now unknown. It was only owned by one royal woman, but the enormous diamond Baltimore tiara has become a favorite among jewel lovers. Princess Margaret purchased it herself at auction and wore it at her wedding in 1960. The tiara was the perfect complement to her 60s beehive, but after her death, her children had to sell it to help pay estate taxes. It fetched an astonishing $1.7 million in a 2006 auction at Christie's. If ever there was a tiara match made in heaven, it was Princess Margaret and this tiara, the Baltimore, with its floral and scroll elements. The tiara gets its name from its original owner, Florence Bampflide, Lady Baltimore, the wife of the second Baron Baltimore. It was made for Lady Baltimore by Gerard around 1870, and it can be either worn as a tiara or broken down into a necklace and 11 brooches. As a tiara, it can be worn in its full glory or in a slightly smaller version. Margaret, the wife of a third Baron Baltimore, wore the tiara at the 1911 coronation. Lady Baltimore's grandson, the fourth Baron Baltimore, offered the tiara for sale at auction in 1959. Princess Margaret, who would marry the Earl of Snowdon, snapped it up for a mere £5,500. She wore the tiara, which is actually a completely closed circlet, at her wedding. Margaret died in 2002, and by 2006 her two children faced a massive estate tax bill. Although, along with quite a few of Margaret's other jewels, although not all of her tiaras, the Baltimore was auctioned at Christie's. Once upon a time, the royal vaults in Belgium held more tiaras than they do today. One of the most sparkling of all the old pieces was the diamond and platinum bandeau created by Cartier for Queen Elizabeth, wife of King Albert I. Elizabeth often wore the piece low across her forehead in 1920s style. Later, her daughter-in-law, Princess Lillian, wore it more traditionally. Lillian's sister was married to Jean-Jacques Cartier, and in 1987 she sold the tiara back to the firm. Cartier's acquisition of this royal tiara means that you can actually see it today, as it's often included in exhibitions. Elizabeth was born a Bavarian duchess. She married Albert, the future king of the Belgians, in 1900. The two ascended the Belgian throne 9 years later, so by the time she acquired this tiara in 1912 from Cartier, she was already a queen. The sparkler is made of diamonds set in platinum. Some have referred to this piece as a foliated tiara, and you can see leaf motifs interspersed with scrolling elements that dominate the tiara. Queen Elizabeth retained the tiara even after the unexpected death of her husband in a 1934 mountain climbing accident. She chose it for some of the most public occasions held during her lifetime in Belgium, including the religious wedding of her son, Crown Prince Leopold, and Princess Astrid of Sweden in 1926, and at the ball held during the wedding celebrations for her grandson, King Baldwin, in 1960. When she died in 1965, she left the Cartier tiara to her son, Leopold. He had reigned in Belgium as Leopold III until 1951, but in the wake of controversy about his sympathies during the war where he surrendered to the Nazis and was exiled to France, he had abdicated in favor of his eldest son, Baldwin. The next wearer of the tiara after Elizabeth was Leopold's second wife, Lillian, the Princess of Rethie. Lillian actually had connections of her own to the Cartier family because her sister, Lydia Bales, was married to the head of Cartier's London branch. Leopold died in 1983, and in 1987, Lillian sold Elizabeth's tiara back to the maker, Cartier. Leopold had left the tiara to his wife, so it was her personal property to dispose of as she wished. However, the sale caused controversy in the royal family because Lillian sold the piece without consulting King Baldwin and Queen Fabiola. Today, the tiara remains in the archives of Cartier. For years, royal watchers hoped that this tiara, often called the Rundell tiara because of confusion about its maker, was simply hidden away in the vaults at Buckingham Palace, but that's not the case. This piece, Queen Alexandra's wedding gift tiara, or the Rundell tiara, was a part of the suite of jewels ordered by King Edward VII from Gerard as a wedding present for his bride, Alexandra of Denmark, in 1863. Queen Elizabeth still owned the necklace and brooch from the set, but Alexandra left the tiara to another branch of her family, her unmarried daughter, Princess Victoria, who unfortunately disposed of the piece, according to Hugh Roberts, the Queen's Diamonds. The tiara was believed to have been made by Rundell and Bridge. But while that jewelry house did supply pieces to the British royals, this tiara and its accompanying jewels were made by another familiar name, Gerard. While the tiara was an all-diamond affair, it was part of a larger diamond and pearl set made by the company in 1862. The set included the tiara, a necklace, a brooch, and a pair of earrings. Although the pieces were made as a set, there are a few similarities in the design of the tiara, which was an all-diamond piece with knot and fleur-de-lis motifs, and the rest of the set, which feature button-style pearl and diamond clusters and pearl-shaped pearl pendants. Queen Alexandra wore the necklace, earrings, and brooch on her wedding day, but not the tiara. She wore flowers in her hair instead. You can see the brooch pinned on the bodices of her gown. The parure was commissioned by the future Edward VII, then Prince of Wales, for his future bride, Princess Alexandra of Denmark. Alexandra rarely wore the pieces together, choosing instead to pair each piece with different jewels. The tiara was especially versatile for mixing and matching with other pieces. 3 rows of diamonds made up a solid base upon which were mounted a series of interchangeable elements. Queen Alexandra commonly wore the tiara with large diamond fleur-de-lis elements interspersed with intricate interlocking diamond knots. However, the tiara could also be worn without those bridge elements or with diamond stars in place of the fleur-de-lis. Author Roberts reports that although Alexandra did not have a will when she died in 1925, she did indicate items of jewelry that she wished to leave to each of her daughters. The Gerard tiara was inherited by Princess Victoria, and unfortunately, Roberts notes that the tiara was disposed of by her. The brooch, necklace, and earrings were all inherited by Queen Mary on Alexandra's death. Mary gave the necklace to her daughter-in-law, Queen Elizabeth, and the piece became one of Elizabeth's favorite and most worn necklaces. In November 1947, she chose to wear it for her daughter's royal wedding at Westminster Abbey. She kept and wore the necklace for the rest of her life, leaving it to her elder daughter, Queen Elizabeth II, in 2002. The necklace was most recently worn by another member of the royal family, the Duchess of Cambridge, in 2018.